Welcome to Wadsworth History on Film, a program presented by the Wadsworth Area Historical Society and designed to record the oral history for Wadsworth. I'm Caesar Carino, your host, and we have two guests today, and probably everybody in town knows both of them. I have known them forever, I guess, and I'm going to give you his first name, which no one ever calls him by, and then the name that everyone knows him by. This is Harold Pinky Fulton. And we know Pinky Fulton and Janet Fulton. Janet was Janet Blau, and their family goes back hundreds of years, and your family goes back hundreds of years. Why don't we start with you, Pinky, and you tell us when you were born, and where you were born, and who your parents were, and your brothers and sisters, and things like that, and then we'll let Janet do the same thing.
Well, I was born August 16th, 1919 at Grandview, and I had a brother born in 1917 who has passed away, and a sister was born.
What are their names? Let's have the names.
Robert Fulton.
Robert Fulton.
Then I had Eleanor Fulton, who was a year younger than me. She was born 1920. And of course they have children, grandchildren.
And you were born on Grandview. Do you remember the name, the number of the house?
Not exactly. It's about the third house down from the corner.
From Broad Street?
No, from Mill Street.
Oh, from Mill Street.
Down south, yes. And then we lived there for right around 6 years old. And Dad had taught school in the old one-room schoolhouse. He came to Wadsworth.
Which one-room schoolhouse, Pinky?
Oh, he taught over Spencerville, Lodi, Spencer, a whole lot of them. And Mom did too. And they got married. They came to Wadsworth, and then we moved down 2-3 houses out of the city limits.
Where?
The corner of Johnson Road, Main Street.
Johnson Road and Main Street. That would be south of town.
That's south of town. And we lived there until 1941. And this is where I divide Wadsworth in my life. In 1940, when I was drafted, 1st of April, Bob Neal from Wadsworth went with me.
Bob Neely?
Neal.
Oh, Bob.
He was drafted. And then they said it was a year, but it was the April Fool's joke. I got back in the States in 45. So I was out of Wadsworth from 41 to June 45.
Well, but just about everyone your age group was out of town for
yeah.
3 or 4
Then so I kind of divided Wadsworth up for me. Wadsworth before the war and after the war.
And you have that pretty well in your memory.
Oh, yes.
Who were your parents?
Well, that's another story. Back in those old days, a lot of fathers went by the middle name.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And Dad's right name was Arthur Ray Fulton, but he was known by Ray Fulton.
Ray Fulton. Everyone knew him as Ray.
Yes.
And where did he work?
He worked at the post office.
For years and years and years. When did he start in the post office?
I think around 1917.
And you worked in the post office?
Yes.
How long was that tenure of the Fultons being in the post office?
Well, between Dad and I and his brother and his son who worked in there, it went to 1983.
So 1917 to 1983.
With exception, maybe a couple years in between there. It was a Fulton and a Wadsworth post office.
That's a long time. 1917 to 1983, there was a Fulton there. As a matter of fact, when we were growing up, Fulton and post office were synonymous. I mean, everyone knew that. Janet, how about telling a little bit about your family? You have a very, very long legacy here in Wadsworth as well. Tell us about yours.
Well, I was the daughter of Glenn and Addie Blau. Addie Cunningham was her name. My grandfather was Andrew D. Blau, or Andy Blau they called him.
Yes.
And he married Catherine Steiner. And my grandfather was a school teacher in Cedar Valley, Ohio. And they came to, where they were married sometime around 1869. I'm wrong on that. They were married 1889.
1889.
And Catherine Steiner, just for a side note, was her father and Helen Steiner Rice, who was the poet's grandfather, were brothers.
Oh, really?
Helen Steiner Rice's grandfather and Kate Steiner Blau's father were brothers.
Oh, for heavens, I didn't know that.
And I never knew that.
So we have the cousin of a very notable writer. Mm-hmm. Yes. Mm-hmm. And
they came to Wadsworth in 1892.
1892.
March of 1892, they came to Wadsworth.
107 years ago.
Grandpa had been a school teacher, but he went to pharmacy school, and I have his certificate of his diploma from the state of Ohio pharmacy.
Your grandfather.
Yes, and it's dated March 20th, 1891.
1891. Wow.
Now, Grandpa, when he came to Wadsworth, had a drugstore where the VFW is. That's at 119 Main Street, I think, is the address. But if you look on the top of that building, the name Blau is in the front of that building.
Yes, it is. That's right. Yes. Mm-hmm.
And
He built the building?
I don't know if he built it or not. I doubt it, but I don't really know.
But his name's up there.
The name is up there.
Usually they put the name up if the person builds it.
Yeah, well, I know that, but I'm not sure about that. But then after several years as being in the drugstore, he established the Blau Remedy Company, which sold home remedies.
Right. We have had a lot of people who talked about the Blau Remedy Company.
And he sold those at little country stores all over eastern Pennsylvania, western Indiana, and Ohio. And we used to he'd go out on Monday or Tuesday and come back on Friday. And so Grandma was raising her kids by herself.
Pretty well so. Mm-hmm.
And so they had 10 boys.
And who were the...
Well, they lost 3 boys. The boys that lived, who lived to manhood, were Walter, Glenn, Ralph, who was Tex Blau.
Tex Blau, right.
And Tex was on the fire department for 35 years
Yep.
and was fire chief for 5.
Chief, right. Mm-hmm.
And then there was Leslie, and they always called him Crumb because
Crum Blau. I didn't know his name was Leslie.
Grandpa had a man working in his office by the name of Crumb, one of the Crumb Rhines.
Surely, yes.
And that's where Les got his nickname Crumb.
Crumb, for heaven's sakes. Now, what did Crumb do? Tell us what Crumb did.
He was head of light and water building department.
Tall man. He always wore a shade.
And he worked at the building department for 35 years, retiring in 1967.
Tell us the name of the lady who worked with him.
Isla Hilliard.
Isla Hilliard.
She was, I can't think of her husband's name. Was it Harry Hilliard?
No. And I can't think of it either. It's not Harry, I don't think.
Yeah, she was Isla Hilliard, and they lived on Boyer Street at that time.
She's the fastest money counter I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
Oh, she could, just as fast as a machine. She's very
And
good.
they didn't have nearly the business those days they have now in the light and water department.
No,
It's probably tripled or more than that. And he was a basketball coach and football coach for a while. Played both, but he coached the Wadsworth football team when their coach had to was drafted in 1917.
That's Crum Blau, you mean?
That was Leslie Crumb.
Yeah, Leslie Crum Blau.
Yeah, and he coached that team that year, 1917. It was the first time Wadsworth was ever undefeated.
No kidding.
Up until recent years.
Yeah, that was great.
And then he was head of the Red Cross
Yes, he
for
was. I remember
35
that.
years. He retired from that. He didn't. Yes, he retired from that, but he served longer than anybody else, they said. And Les died in 1974. And then after Les, there was I'm on the wrong sheet. After Les, there was Wade, and there was Wayne. Wayne was a teacher and football coach, and he also was principal of East Cleveland Schools.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me, I'm wrong. Superintendent of East Cleveland Schools before he retired. And then there was Jake, and Jake married one of the Gable girls.
Which Gable?
Lucille Gable.
Lucille Gable, who was Speedy or Russell Gable's sister?
Russell Gable's sister.
Right,
She was
Speedy Gable.
Russell Gable's sister.
Right. And which one is the parent of Jim Blau?
Which Jim?
Jim, age 67 right now. Sang, the ones who, the Blauses sang.
Oh, that would be Clayton Blouse.
Clayton Blouse, okay.
That would be Clayton. That would have been Grandpa's nephew's family.
Mm-hmm. They are cousins of yours, though.
They're probably third or fourth
Yeah.
cousins, but
Yeah.
that'd be Grandpa's nephew's children. And but because Wayne was called
Pete Blau, yeah, Pete Blau.
and he played football and stuff. But his son, he has a son Jim also, who lives in Fort Myers,
Florida.
Yes, and he's in the antique business. Wayne had Jack, who was a professor at Akron U for a while, and then is now retired, living in St. Augustine. And then he had Jim, who's in Fort Myers, and Nancy, who is Nancy Wilson, that lives up in Kirkland, Ohio.
Mm-hmm.
And they're all children of Pete Blouse.
Pete Blau's children, right.
And he was married to Elizabeth Dam, her father used to own the theater before Sykes bought the theater.
Dam, D-A-M-M.
Yes.
That's that's a pretty good chunk of history there, isn't it, Pinky? Now, how did you and you all went through school, of course, and we've heard about a lot of the teachers and all of that, but since you're just a wee little bit older, Pinky, who were some of the teachers you remember so very, very well in the earlier grades?
Me. Well, I went to Isham, centralized.
Yes,
was
and who were
then.
the teachers there?
Oh, Mrs. Vining and
H.B.
Goodman
Vining.
and Ralph Rohr and
Bertha Kuhn.
yeah, and I had Clifford and
Gates, Mrs. Gates.
yeah, I didn't have her, but she was there then. And
Mrs. Goodwin.
but one thing about the school, which wouldn't go now, when J.B. Vining was the superintendent, they had a Victrola down in the hall, and they'd play it, and he had two pieces of wood, and he'd clap them together, and we marched out to the kid buses. We didn't run out, we marched out. He was real strict.
He's kind of a tough man, wasn't he?
Yes, he was.
Describe him a little bit, his size and all of that.
But he was rather large. His wife taught second grade, and she was a wonderful teacher.
Oh, she was the most gentle person
Yeah,
that the earth has ever known.
She was a good
She probably is one of my favorite teachers throughout all my lifetime. Tell us about this clapping. People don't believe that. Tell us exactly how he did it.
Well, he just had two blocks of wood, and he clapped to the tune of music, sort of. But you walked, you marched out. It was music that you marched to.
With no talking, of course.
No, and of course they didn't do that all the time. I went there the first few years or so, because when I first went, we went to school in a horse-drawn
Carriage.
vehicle. Yeah,
Who drove it? Who was the teamster?
Cleve West.
Cleve West.
And then they got trucks, and then finally Herman Brenner drove it. Well, then
Herman Brenner from down on Seville Road.
yeah, sorted by all the factories now.
Yeah.
And then, of course, when I come up to the city school, I walked to school all the time.
Where did you live at that time?
Still down on the Main Street.
And you walked, how many miles is that? That's what I
about a mile and 10.
Mile and a tenth.
Yeah.
That you walked all the time. There are no school buses for the city students, is that right?
Yes, they had school buses, I guess.
Not
but
for the city, though.
No.
No, just for the
No,
township people.
so then, and I teachers up in high school. I had Chester Hawk and Miss Billman. I remember her very good because she, when we first started in there the first time of the year, she wouldn't know who we were, so she'd point to us to the color shirt we had on or something. So we all got together for the same color shirts.
Boys will be boys in those days as well as they are today. Pinky, you are a little bit older than Janet, about what, 7 or 8 years, 8 years or something like that. How did you meet her?
Well, of course, I was almost 26. I got out of service, and I just didn't go around with girls that much. And then Ivan Lellerman, whose dad owned a Lellerman grocery store in the South End, he was working at the match course, and she worked at the match, and he introduced us. So that's how we introduced. I graduated from high school with her sister, Harriet.
With Harriet Blau. So you knew the family then?
Yeah, and I remember Charles Schufts, who lived right across the driveway from us, raised Ethel Spencer, who married Wade Blau. And I remember her and her brother down there when they were little. But I mean, I really didn't know them, but I remember they were saying.
Probably didn't care for her then, did you?
Well, I didn't. We played ball all the time.
Oh, yeah. Well, now, when were you married, Janet?
October 7th, 1950.
So you've been married for a long time.
49 years.
49 years. You'll be pretty soon your 50th anniversary. And tell us about your children before we forget them. Who are they and your grandchildren? How many do we have all
You
together?
want to do that?
Well, there's 4 grandchildren.
But you have to have children first.
Well, we had Chris Messner, who married Messner.
Tell us which messenger.
Craig
But
Messner,
who
whose
was
dad taught school here.
And who was the father?
Lyle.
Lyle Messner.
And then Kathy is divorced. She married a person by the name of Peace, and she lives on Baird Avenue now. And Lyle, he lives in Green Cove Springs, Florida, but he manages the water treatment plant in Orange Park. And Paula is a secretary in Acworth, Georgia. And Paula has no children. Lyle has a boy, and then Chris has 2 boys, and Kathy had 2 girls. And the one girl, Kathy's girl, graduated last year, is going to Urbana, and Chris's boy is going to Stark Tech.
So they have adult children too.
Yes.
Do you have any great-grandchildren?
No.
Not yet. Pretty
Not
soon.
married yet.
Not married yet. Pinky, tell us a little bit about the old post office in 1917. You probably were there with your dad, weren't you?
Oh yes, I went down there quite a bit. In fact, they used to just have 2 rural routes in that time. Bill Ray and Percy Kreitz were the rural carriers. Then later on, Tom Johnson came in. And back in the original days, before they had what they called the Star Route, where all your mail goes to Akron and is delivered here, they tied the mail up there, sorted how it up there, and it was set down the depot. Of course, the depot is now destroyed, and then they bring it back. The post office has changed quite a bit now from when I left.
Where was the post office in 1917?
Well, I think it was across there on near where the jewelry store. Oh well, it was there by the dentist's office. There
It was on the east side
Yes.
of Main Street.
Yes.
Side of Main Street.
Yeah.
Right, and but
Close
not
to
too
where
far.
Dr. Guthrie's office.
Right, not too terribly far from where your grandfather's.
Right up
That's
the
right.
street.
Right up the street, 2 or 3, well, about 4 doors up from
Yes.
where your grandfather had his grocery or a drugstore.
And then when it moved to 150 Main, then it was there until 1937 when they built this where they're at now. But if you still go down there, 150 Main, and look on the south side of that building, you see a big iron door.
Right.
And that's where they carried the mail in and out when they went down the depot out
Now,
of.
if you go into that store, I don't know if it's still there or not, but the Ackermans purchased that
Yes.
for the B&B store.
Yes.
And the safe was so big that they couldn't get it out, and they used the United States Post Office safe in there all those years. That was 1937, and then they didn't move there in 1937 though, did they?
Where? Wadsworth Post Office?
Yes.
Yes, I have a clipping at home that shows that. Shows pictures of my dad and all them, Lee Thompson, and then move on over there.
But when did they move from the east side of Broad Street?
Oh, that I don't know.
Yeah. I think it was 1927.
Probably.
Yeah.
That sounds about right.
I think that's pretty close to it. And then 1937 they moved over to the new one up there, because in 1927 the B&B store was down where on the corner of Mill and Main at one time. Now, what do you remember about the post office? You told us about the fact that they had only 2 star routes, and in all honesty, this is the first time that I have known what a star route is. What is it?
Well, they deliver the mail. It goes to Akron, and then they go to Doylestown, Redmond, Wadsworth, and so on, and drop it off instead of dropping it off on a mail bag down at the depot like we used to.
And then, what about the rural routes? When were they established at that time?
Well, the rural routes were. That's when the ones with Frank Ray, Bill Ray and them. And the L.C. Cordy and Charlie Orr used to be the ones that took the mail from their office down to the depot and back.
Right. Now, we have to spell all these names because 50 years from now we may not know them. Bill Ray is, of course, William, R-A-Y, and his he had 2 daughters, did he?
Yes.
Martha and,
But when the R-A-E,
is it R-A-E?
wasn't it R-A-E?
Yeah, I think it was.
R-A-E? Okay, R-A-E. Good, I'm
Yeah.
glad you mentioned that.
Or else R-E-A maybe.
But
Well, his Tom Cox was his
that's right.
son-in-law,
That's right.
and he'll correct it.
Yeah,
I'm sure he will.
Yeah, that's right. He made one.
He was our postman. Bill Ray was our postman for years and years and years. Nicest guy in the world, just a wonderful person. And then he had a Ruth. I couldn't think of Ruth Ray is the one who married Tom Cox, and
That's
she
right.
died. Yeah,
That's
she
right.
died then. And you say the Orr, O-R-R.
Yeah, and L.C. Cordy.
You know, what was Orr's first name?
I don't remember.
And L.C. Cordy.
Yeah.
Spell it.
Well, I'm not sure of that either. I think it's C-O-R-D-E-Y or something like that.
And what did L.C. stand for? Do you know?
I didn't know that either. Oh, I know they that was their job at that time. And then of course the Wadsworth got bigger, and They got more routes and so on. When I carried 3 different routes in Wadsworth.
Where did you carry right?
I started at the south end first, and then I carried out east of town, and I ended up carrying the business district.
And did you do that on foot?
All on foot, yeah. It was on foot.
I imagine that you have a good cardiovascular system as a result of all that walking.
Well, yeah, that's okay. But there was one disadvantage in working in the post office. They had the Hatch Act, and now it has been repealed. But I know Dad was taking around a piece of paper so they didn't raise phone rates, and he got ruled into Washington on. You wasn't allowed to get in any political.
I know.
Whatsoever.
I'm not sure that the Hatch Act is repealed.
Well, anyway, so that did give you a little disadvantage there. So I guess if you wanted to say we was community-minded family, Mom and Dad taught Sunday school, and Dad
Where did they teach Sunday school, Pinky?
at Lutheran Church.
At the Lutheran Church?
Mom taught 17 years of class of Mary, and Dad taught around 12 years.
Mm-hmm.
And then after the war, I worked at custodian of the First Christian Church for 34 years along with the post office.
Before you went to the post office?
No, with the post office.
Oh, with the post office.
Yes, and I done this in my spare time, but I thought it was one way, we could kind of serve the community, being we couldn't do it politically anyway.
Yeah.
So, Dad, I always saw our family try to be a part of the community as much as they could be.
Janet, as you went through high school, you were a member of the in-group. Who were some of those people that were the in-group people?
Well, when I was in high school,
Very popular. Janet was very popular in high school.
I ran around with some of the kids that were a little bit older than I was. Winnie Thompson Wolf, that would be Lee Thompson's daughter, and I were good friends. And Alida Anderson, who is now in Columbus, I believe. At one time, later in high school, I ran around with Margaret Butai, who was Margaret Bodley, and Eleanor Dangle.
Of course, Margaret Butai was your classmate.
Yeah, she was a classmate.
Margaret Bodley.
And then, I worked when I was in high school. I worked every night.
And you worked where? Tell us where you worked. I think that's so interesting.
Beg pardon?
Tell us where you worked.
At that time, Grandpa still owned the building at the drugstore, and he rented the building to Edward and Goldstein and Lou Hirsch. And they had a drugstore called G&H.
G&H drugstore, and you worked there.
I worked there, and I worked nights while I was going to high school. And
I remember that very well.
I never went to a football game until after I was out of high school.
No kidding.
Because I was always working Friday nights. But the football team would come in, and we do the football game. And my grandfather at that time worked as a pharmacist because he had his license and everything. But he didn't do any heavy work, and he was just so he could fill prescriptions. And so Grandpa loved listening to those boys rehash the game over. And so I was able to enjoy that while I was working. And then after I left the drugstore, I went to the Ohio Match Company and worked in the office of the Ohio Match.
And with whom did you work? Who were some of the people?
Cosmo Chapin was my...
Spell it, please, for us.
Cosmochapin was the last name. Cosmo Chapin.
Cosmo Chapin. And what did he do?
He was the purchasing agent for the Ohio Match Company at that time.
He was not around Wadsworth for a long time, though, was he?
Oh, I believe he was. His brother, I think, carried mail.
Did he?
At one time.
They called him Toots.
Oh, Toots Chapin's brother. Okay.
And so I worked there till 1950, I think, 51. And I quit there, and I didn't work for a while. And then I worked at Bremen's Pharmacy. Mm-hmm. I was at the drugstore for about 4 or 5 years because I worked a year after I was out of high school. And I loved that job because I liked being with people and around people. And so then I went to work at one time for Glenn Brenneman up at Brenneman's Pharmacy after I was married. I worked there part-time.
I remember that too. Mm-hmm.
And then I worked, after our oldest daughter was in high school, or before she was in high school, she needed some demo work done. So I decided I'd go out and find a job. So I got a job at Smith Dairy. Mm-hmm. They had a little store on Wautusa Avenue, which is now what is in that
Well, the
building?
banner printing and,
But it's just off of College Street.
right, and the banner printing and, well, Well-Chosen Graphics was there, but,
The milkmen came and loaded up their trucks there.
Yes.
That was the main object of having that building. And then we had sold dairy products, but we also had a lunch counter there.
now, who worked with you at the lunch counter?
At the lunch counter was Mary Brown Gilbert.
And who
Mary
else?
Brown was there when I came there. And then Dorothy Please, that would be Raymond Please, his wife,
Right, right.
worked there for a while. Irma Little worked there.
Mm-hmm.
And our daughter Kathy worked there for a little bit. And some of the other young girls were, I just can't think right now who they were.
You know, one of the programs I talked about the Yoder girls.
Yes,
The Yoder who worked at Smith Dairy was Hattie
Hattie,
Yoder.
that's
Hattie Yoder, and I had given the wrong name, so it's
she was
Hattie
in the
Yoder.
office.
Yes, she was.
She was-
But she also worked at the lunch counter.
Oh, did she?
In the late
That's
40s.
before my time then. That was before my time.
Just good, and Ethel Shue.
Yes. And then also Judy Moore worked in the office and Velma Palu.
Velma Palu, yes.
Yes.
Velma Palu, who now is married to, and I know her, she's part of our historical society. Isn't that something, I still call her, no, Velma was the mother.
No, Velma's a mother.
Yes,
You're
Velma's,
thinking of Gloria Schilling, are you?
Shilling, yeah, Gloria.
You're thinking of Gloria
yeah.
Schilling, her daughter.
Yeah, Gloria Schilling is that. Well, Velma is a member of our association, but Gloria Paulu Schilling is, she and her husband are the refreshment people, and just great people to work with.
After, while I was at Smith Dairy, I fell and broke my leg, so that put me off work for a long while. And while I was off, they closed that store, and they then took the trucks down to Orville to have them filled. And so I didn't work for quite a while then, and then I started working for Sonatro of Akron, which was a security company. It was located on West Exchange Street, just off of Locust. And I was there for 16 years and retired there ended up being office manager and retired there in 1989. So I had those places of employment, and I enjoyed. The hardest thing about going into the security company, when I first went, I was working nights by myself, monitoring security systems. And after being used to being with people, that was a hard adjustment.
I'm sure it would be.
Come to.
Yeah.
But I enjoyed it, and I enjoyed my work there. And I've never had an employer who I felt was a bad employer.
That is a gift. That is a gift. That's wonderful. Pinky, as you remember the post office in the 17 to 1983, who were some of the first postmasters that you remember?
Well, I really didn't pay too much attention to it later on, but there was Worth Westenbarger and
Worth Westenbarger, of course, is Glenn Westenbarger's father.
yeah, and Bill Daig.
Bill Daig.
And
his
of course,
son. His son was on our program too. Both of those sons were on our program.
And then when I started in there, Barris Burbeck was there.
Barris Burbeck's son-in-law was on our program.
And of course, one of my little ball player buddies, Bill Gross.
Bill Gross, of course, he was on the program. He died shortly after we interviewed him.
He was on there.
Smoke Thomas.
Smoke Thomas.
Wasn't there a Hunsicker in the early days?
No, Hunsicker was a clerk.
Oh, okay.
So, Graham was the last one. He was there when I quit.
When you quit. Tell us who some of the postmen were, the people who actually delivered mail as you did, and how many people we had.
Well, the only mountain route we have when I worked there was carried by Mike Krivoff. And when he found
Krinov,
yes, and when he knew I retired, I'd gone to Akron and put him on retirement. The next week he did, and he and I retired together. And he didn't live about a year and a half after
he died.
He passed away.
Who was his wife? Do you remember?
She was a Swain girl. And then, of course, we had about 7 other routes. Joe Malici had one. He's retired now.
Right, he's also over 80 years old and in good health.
Yes,
postman is a good way to keep your blood flowing.
And there was John Hughey.
John Hughey married Carol.
John Hughey, he married.
Mary Joyce Bird.
Yeah.
Joyce Bird.
That's
right.
who
His
he
brother
married.
married Carol Dietrich.
Yeah. And then of course I had to wrap it. I was just trying to think of who.
Conway.
Oh,
Out Conway.
Art Conway had one.
Yes.
He's retired now. And Ronnie Hahn had a rural route.
Oh, he's a rural route? I thought that he walked.
Not Moyong. He was in a rural route, and so was Glenn Warner. They were on rural routes.
Prosper Zito,
Yes, Prosper. He was on
real route. Real route.
And then I was trying to think of some more of them. Charlie Wolf, and he died rather young.
Yeah, he did.
He married a bird.
He married a bird girl too.
Yes.
And then there was a Poling who had to quit because of he had he had trouble with his breathing, so he quit early. And so of course now they got a lot of younger fellows in there. Some of them I really don't know them, but they used to always. I used to always kid them. That's how I kind of get them going. If we got a lot of mail in one morning, I'd get up and I'd say, well, boy, I'm sure glad this all came in. Get them riled up.
Pinky, what about 1937 when the new post office opened? Were you there?
Yeah, I saw. Yeah, Dow W. Harder was the representative then. And they had a little pair of them. Took pictures of the guys going there. And
Do you remember who the speaker was?
No. But
He was a postmaster from the United States Postmaster was the speaker.
oh, okay. No, I don't. But anyway, so
And
he
Dick Curtis took a picture of him
did he?
from across the street. Got on the porch and took a picture. Of course, if you know Dick Curtis, he'll do anything like that. He's just a great person.
But it was a shame they had to tear down that old Littner house to build that there. But they did, and of course the O.E.J. Young house was tore down, and that was kind of a nice place.
And they tore the house down for the post office, did they not?
They were tore down, yeah. So
The E.J. Young house, a beautiful home. Janet, as you tried to remember, not as you try to remember, you have such a good memory. Who were some of the, where were some of the stores in town, and who were some of the people? You worked in the stores, and therefore you knew the inner workings of the stores. Who were some of the other girls who worked in the stores, or fellows?
Right beside us was Isley's,
Right.
which is now the Domino's Pizza
Right.
building. And when I was working, Fern Jessel, Durhammer, who was Fern Jessel,
Jessel, right.
and her sister Lois worked there, and Bob Durhammer worked there at one time.
And Bob Durhammer became whose husband?
Now I can't tell you. I don't remember.
Fern Jessel married whom?
Junior Durhammer.
Junior Durhammer.
She married Bob Durhammer's brother.
Brother, okay, all right.
And Max Foley worked there, and Bill McVeigh, who I think is from Sharon Center, I think.
Yeah, up that way, but he was in Wadsworth School, so Bill McVeigh was. No, wait, his father was a minister, wasn't he?
That I can't tell
I think so, I'm not positive, but we'll find out. Someone will call me.
And then, there was down south of the drugstore where Balt's was Miller Jones Shoe Store.
Right, and who worked there?
And I don't know just who was there. Shooky was there.
Shook, well,
But he's the only one I remember that was there.
now he's still living, isn't he?
I don't think so, but I don't know. Do you know?
I don't know about that, but a nice worked down at that shoe store.
Yeah, she worked there later, though. She
Who?
was the Ladricks.
A nice girl from the Clark's Corners. That was Knight's sister.
What's her name now?
Was it Dorothy?
No, I can't think. Mabel? I don't know. And then we had, across the street was another drugstore, was Baker's drugstore, where what is in that building now? It was a Rexall drug at that time. And Baker had that, and Bonnie Baker worked there.
Bonnie Baker? Mm-hmm. Who's Bonnie Brader?
No, Bonnie Baker.
Baker, okay.
Bonnie Baker. And it's hard to remember. I should have wrote these things down. I didn't think of it. But a lot of the girls had part-time jobs at different places.
What about some of the fellows?
Some of the fellas, right now, my mind's gone blank, Caesar. I'm sorry.
No, listen, this is so good that we're going to remember as much as we can. Pinky, boyhood friends.
Well, the boy that named me my nickname was Harold Christian. He passed away a few years ago. He married
Mabel Smith.
Mabel Smith, that had the Smith Cleaners, and Warren Schaefer, who was a brother to Velma Phalu, and Walter Hine, and well, of course, there was my brother then. But we played ball and horseshoes and that stuff all the time. Back in those days, we didn't have money. You didn't belong to a golf club or anything like that. So we cleared fields up and played as the neighbors. So we was kind of an extended relationship between all of us there, and we played.
How did Christine give you the name Pinky?
Well, Christian, I think, I can't say for sure, but I think Pinky Whitney and Pinky Higgins were playing big league ball then, and he gave it to me. I don't know, but you know, we had a Pinky Hutchison in town too,
Yes.
and he was named that too. But
Emmett Hutchison was Pinky Emmett Hutchison?
I think it was his first name. And then we, of course, then we played. The only thing that was regulated then was the church league softball. Then we'd play in that, and pretty soon everybody says Pinky, you know. So it was gone. You couldn't. Mom didn't like it, but there's nothing you could do about it.
I never knew anything but Pinky.
No, nobody else did either. So,
As a matter of fact, no one calls you Harold.
yeah, no.
Not anymore.
No.
Janet, going back to your family again, let's talk a little bit about Crum Blau. Describe him. I mean, he's a big, tall man, thin.
Most of my uncles were fairly tall. I'd say 6 foot at least. And it was funny. I don't know if you know this or not, but I was raised by my grandparents.
Mm-hmm.
My mother died when I was born.
I knew that.
10 days after that. And my grandmother had 10 boys of her own. And then when I was 3 weeks old, she takes me as her first little girl.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the boys were still at home then. And I know they used to tell me that Uncle Les Crum would take me to ball games and stuff and take me around, treat me just like his own little child.
Of course. Mm-hmm.
And he was very tall, and I was scared to death of him as a child.
Oh, really? Why?
I don't know. There was no reason for it. It's just, I think.
No, he's as gentle as a lamb.
I know he was, but it's just how you get those childhood ideas sometimes. And but it ended up that after his first wife, Mary Wright, who was a teacher in the Wadsworth schools, died, Grandpa had died previous to that, so Grandma and I moved up and kept house for him. And I loved him. He gave me away when I got married, as a matter of fact.
Who, Crum did?
Crum did.
Mm-hmm.
And but he was real active in all kinds of sports.
Oh, very, very active in everything.
And that's one reason when I lived with him, I joined a golf league down at the match company and learned to play golf, because he was golfing. I was hearing all about this golf. I had to know what was going on. So I enjoyed
So you joined the
that.
golf team. Tell us about your mother. I know you never knew her.
My
but-
mother was Addie Cunningham, and she was raised in Seville. And she was, I was told, was the secretary at one time. Mm-hmm. And she was raised in Seville, and then they lived in Wadsworth, and they lived on High Street, 457 High Street at the time that my father died. It's where they lived. And after I lived with my grandparents from the time I was three weeks old. And then a year later, when my father died, my brother and my sister came to live with him. I had a brother, Russell, who was born in 1917, I believe it was. No?
Not 17.
Not 17? Well, I'll tell you in a minute.
Don't think so, is he?
14, I think.
14, you're right,
1914,
14.
yeah.
You're right, 14 is right.
Yeah, he was 17. He only
Yeah, it was 14.
82 years old. I knew he was older than that.
And he died in 1962. Mm-hmm. And then I have a sister, Harriet Blau Freed Davis, and she was born in 1937. And after my father died, Harriet and Russell came to live with Grandma and Grandpa.
1937?
No, 27.
27. Yeah.
27. My father died in 28, so
Yeah.
they came to live there
27.
then.
Your sister was born in 27.
She's born in 1919.
Okay, you were born in 27.
I was born in 27.
right.
I'm all mixed up. You gotta forgive me, Cecil.
That's all right, no problem. But I knew that your sister was older than you, and you were
Yes.
born in 1927.
Yes, and she's born in 1919.
Right.
And she lives in Wadsworth. She lives up on the brick apartments on Great Oaks Trail.
Now, tell us who she is.
Harriet Blau Davis, Freed Davis, was Jerry Freed's mother.
Yes, right.
And she had a daughter, Vicky, Freed, who is Vicky Simmons now, down in Georgia. And then she was Jerry's mother, and Jerry just passed away last year.
Right, and Jerry's, they lived in Silver Creek at one time.
Harriet lived in Silver Creek,
Yes.
that's right, across from
Barnhart's.
Lutz's, across from
Lutz is
Lutz's.
right. Barnhart's lived there first, then Lutz
Yes,
is right. Mhm.
yes. And, but she had been in Florida for 28 years. She had lived in Florida after she's married to her second husband.
My brother Henry, whom you know,
Yes.
see, born 27. Jerry was born probably in
42.
40, somewhere in the 40s, and Becky Lutz, the family you just mentioned, she probably was born right around the same age, same time. We're going to high school, and my brother Henry was just then out of the service, and he drove right past them, and he took both of them to school, the high school. You know, the convenience of a school bus is something parents absolutely love, but the second that a child gets into high school, doesn't want to ride a school bus anymore. He wants to ride in a car. So Hank took them to school. The irony of it is that all of them died. All three of those people died, and two of them died, Jerry and Hank, died just within months of each other. All three of the people who were in that car are dead. Isn't that something? I mean, there's no rhyme or reason for it, obviously,
Yes.
but it's just a coincidence. And I thought of that time and time again. And your sister has, unfortunately, seen the death of a child. Now, she is alone again, is she not?
She is living in an apartment by herself.
Yeah.
Her daughter-in-law, Nancy Freed, who is Jerry's wife,
Right,
takes very good care of her and kind of watches after her. And she's with us some of the time. And she's going to take a trip down to Georgia.
Yeah, she's in good health.
Well, fairly good health.
I mean, at our age, anything,
If
getting
you
out of
walk
bed
with
in the
2
morning.
feet, you're in good health.
That's right. You get out of bed in the morning, you're in good health. Now, Pinky, what about your family? Who's left in your family? I know that you have had some gone, but who's left in your family?
Me.
You're it.
I'm it outside of the children that my sister and brother had.
Yeah,
I
well,
mean, they'd be-
you have some grandchildren,
Yeah,
and
they'd be-
nieces and nephews and
Well,
so
yes,
forth.
sister-in-law,
But of this
brother-in-law.
group, you are it.
I'm
You're it.
I'm
Now,
the-
what about the cousins? We didn't get the Fulton cousins, and there are a lot of Fulton cousins.
Well, yes. See, Jim Fulton was Dad's youngest brother. He worked at Fulton. Well, he had 3 boys, and they all went to the Navy, and they all live now state. And then Carl Fulton had Marvin, who lives down here in Wall Road now. He's around here. And then Frank Fulton died young, and he has a Nina Zuber and a Easton. They Zubers live on the road to Rittman.
Now, you just mentioned a couple of the Fultons who are still living in town. Tell us who is living in town now.
Well, the only ones living in town
Marvin.
is Marvin and I,
Yeah.
from our immediate family.
Now, whom did Marvin marry?
Days. Earl Days' daughter.
Earl Days' daughter,
Maryland.
pardon me?
Maryland.
Marilyn Days, that's
Yes.
right. And she had a brother, Jim Days. No.
I don't think.
Yeah, she has a younger brother. Yeah, and I
don't
can't think
know.
of his name right now. But
See, Earl worked the post office, I think, for a while.
He did. He delivered our mail when we lived on Prospect Street.
right, Earl Days did, right. So those are the only 2 Fultons of your family who are still
And
living.
my immediate family.
Immediate family.
Yeah.
And Marvin Fulton is probably, what, 75, 76, 78?
Somewhere in that area. And then, of course, that Milo Fulton that had the furniture store up there, who was burned a while back, and
Where? Tell us where that furniture store is.
it was on Route 3 going to Medina. And he made furniture all over the United States. Like, he is
The one on the west side of the road.
Yes, he's the first
just
cousin
north
of
of
Past Pole Road.
Past Pole Road. right.
he's living. He's the first cousin of mine. But I mean, like you say, in Wadsworth itself, is Marvin and I.
Right, those are the only 2.
There's other Fultons here, but they're distant related. But I don't-
Distant related.
Yeah, I see it by the phone book. There are a few others, but
And maybe not even related at all is entirely possible.
well, yeah, but I think they are because they.
And Janet, who's living in Wadsworth now of the Blouse that you remember, of your age group?
My age group, in Wadsworth, I think it'd be just Harriet and I.
Just the two of you, the sisters, the two sisters.
Oh, no, I take that back. It's Mary Urban, Mary Blau,
Okay.
Texas daughter Mary.
Texas daughter Mary. Okay. Yes,
She
that's
lives
right.
in Wadsworth.
Mary Urban.
Mary Urban.
Yeah.
And then her sister Grace Morton lives in Uniontown.
Okay.
Grace is an age between Harriet and I. Grace graduated probably about 41 or 42 from Wadsworth High School.
Probably.
And her
yes.
name is Morton, Grace Morton now.
Grace Morton. Hmm.
And then I have a grandnephew that lives on Ohio Avenue. I think they go to your church, Caesar, but I'm
Who's
not
that?
sure. A Debbie Blau, and she has a daughter Nikki, and a son
Oh yes,
Christopher.
yes. Hmm.
That would be my brother's grandson and his family.
Your brother's grandson is
My
now-
brother was Russell,
Yes, Russell Blau.
and he had a dry cleaning plant in Brunswick,
Yes,
first
right.
dry cleaning plant in Brunswick. And his son Niles lives in Medina, Niles Blau, and his wife's name's Rita. And Niles worked for Medina Supply Company, and this is Niles Jr., who lives on Ohio Avenue.
At one time, the Blaus flooded Wadsworth.
Yes.
There were a million of them around here. Everyone is Blaus. And isn't it strange? It doesn't take long for that to disappear.
We would have one aunt living in that generation. That would be Wade's wife, Ethel Spencer Blau, and she's living in Houston, Cypress, Texas, outside Houston.
How old is she right now?
She'll be 92, I think, this
92.
June.
And how old would Crum Blau be now if he were alive? Close to 100 or
Well,
whatever.
he died in 74, at 77.
74, so 1897. So he'd be over 100 years old now.
Yes.
Right. And Tex Blau. Tell us a little bit about Tex and the fact that he was the fire chief. How many was
35 years he was fire
35
chief, and 5 years was the, no, 35 years on the department and 5 years the chief.
as a chief?
But he had a plumbing business when he was younger, Blau Plumbing and Heating, that was in the basement part of Grandpa's building on Main Street. And he had eaten fish, so they said one time, down at Biloxi, Mississippi, and gotten a fish bone caught in his throat. So they removed his voice box.
Yeah, he had
And
always
he had
had
an
that.
artificial speaking thing, but
Right.
he had black Labrador retriever dogs, great big dogs. And he could discipline those dogs just by snapping his fingers or clapping his hands.
No kidding.
And he was a big man, too.
Oh, they were all big men, yes.
He was married to Marcella Oswald first, who was Mary's mother, and she died. And Grandma had her for a year or two, too, before he remarried.
Now, this grandmother had to be a saint. She had 10
was.
kids,
And
and she brought...
can you imagine being the age of 58 and taking a newborn baby?
Oh, mercy, no.
The day I hit 58, that really hit me. But then, and he did a lot of plumbing business. And then he married Catherine Coppice, who was Eli Coppice's
Eli
daughter.
Coppice's daughter.
And they had Grace, who I just mentioned a minute ago. And she did. We cousins, Grace and Harry and Mary, and I try to get together once in a while. And last summer, 2 summers ago, it was Harriet and Jerry was there. And my cousin Carol, that'd be Wade's daughter, from Painesville came down. And Wayne Pete Blau's daughter Nancy came, and his son Jim was there. And we had a real nice get-together of
Son
cousins.
Jim is how old now? 67?
Probably in that area.
And he's a singer, has a beautiful singing
No,
voice.
not that.
No?
That's not that. So that's a different Jim.
Okay,
that's,
another Jim,
That's
okay.
Clayton Blau.
Okay,
That'd be
Clayton
the
Blau.
Clayton or the other Jack Blau. See, it was confusing because I had a Jack Blau in my class at school, but he was the gas. They worked for the gas company, Jack
Right.
and Clayton, and that Jim Blau. But the Jim Blau I'm talking about is Wayne Blau.
Okay, different one altogether.
That would be Jack the teacher's.
Okay, Jack Blau, the teacher.
Brother.
Now, where is Jim Blau and Jack Blau, the singers?
I have no idea.
They are cousins, though.
They would not be first cousins, probably third or fourth cousins.
Third or fourth cousins, but they were all.
They would be the Clayton's family.
They would sing. Christmas carols in the morning, all around Wadsworth. They were carolers.
Oh, yes, I remember that when I was a little girl.
Yes,
They used
they
to
had
do that.
beautiful, beautiful
Yes.
voices. Oh my, they were beautiful.
Yeah.
What are some of your memories of early Wadsworth? Going way back to.
Well, I suppose the most dramatic experience was when I was in the 7th grade. I was at the church, and Dr. Eder had just finished his sermon, and they brought the money up to the altar, of course, after the sermon. He had cerebral hemorrhage and died.
Right there on the spot.
Right there on the spot. And that was quite a thing for a person at that age, for something like that to happen. That probably was the most dramatic thing.
Do you see that scene every time you go to church?
Oh, no. I'm pretty good at accepting things. I mean, like my sister and brother, I accept them rather easily, I suppose, compared to what a lot of people would. I guess my morality and everything, I accept things as that's the way it's supposed to be and don't worry too much about it.
Well, it's a good way if you can do it. That's great.
And then, of course, I was always a person that thought if you should talk to people, because what you say passes on. You don't know how good it is to talk to somebody. If people kind of think of me, well, I go to the mall and walk. Well, I walk downtown. Part of the reason is because I see people and I talk.
Of course.
And my cousin, who moved to Glenview, suburb of Chicago, she said, when I was out of the street, she said, now don't you go talk to everybody. They don't do that out here.
Well, they surely don't.
So,
No. I was in New York. My kids lived in New York for a while. As a matter of fact, they still do, but they don't live in Manhattan anymore. And, of course, you know, that's a fur piece from Wadsworth, as you well know. I mean, no one is friendly, and everyone is always angry and so forth. But I thought that the very, very worst thing that happened, we were walking across Broadway at about 114th or so, and there was a fender bender wreck. Mm-hmm. And my immediate thought was, oh, hope no one is hurt. You know what the rest of them did? They turned around and applauded. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. So, you know, and I love to talk to people too, and it's one of the reasons that I really can't go shopping, my wife says, is that it takes 4.5 hours to go shopping because I stop and talk to everyone. And she loves to talk, but she has a capacity for being somewhat quiet and, you know, reserved, and she doesn't, she's very friendly, but she, not the she's not near so spontaneous as I am. So she does the shopping because I would never get finished. Janet, we were talked about your high school days, and you did some work, and you were working on all those other kinds of things. Tell us one thing that probably somewhat began in your era, and maybe it didn't. How many girls drove cars in high school?
Very few.
Very few.
But I can remember at the end of World War II, Winnie Thompson Wolf,
Yes.
it was doing gas rationing. And we would borrow her dad's car, because she was older than I was and had the license. Mm-hmm. And we would use her car if we wanted to go anyplace. But you didn't drive a car to school.
Oh, never.
And you didn't own a car,
No.
you know. But I know when my grandfather, when I got my license, my driver's license, my grandfather said to me, now just because you have your license, don't think you can have the car anytime you want. Mm-hmm. And, but it turned out to be a good thing because Grandpa got to the point where he couldn't drive. And then when he passed away in 1954. And after he passed away, I was Grandma's transportation.
Right.
And so it did help, I mean, in the end.
But I'd be willing to wager that very few girls drove cars.
Very, very few.
Very few.
I can't remember any of our kids, any of my friends taking driver's training or anything like that.
I didn't have it.
Mm-mm. No.
And the males would learn how to drive cars, and girls never drove cars with males in it. The male always drove. Is that correct?
And now if you drive down the street, by the cars, a woman driving, and maybe 2 or 3 or 4.
Oh yes, I mean you wouldn't. After I left the university, I went to a couple of high schools to help out for a little while. Every single girl in the high school drove a car. Every single girl in the high school. And I thought to myself, you know, when we were going to high school, they didn't. I can still remember, still remember, and this was in 1948 when we graduated, that many of the girls did not yet drive cars and could not drive wherever they wanted to go. Some of them did.
I can't feature a woman today not driving a car.
No, everyone
But I have a
car.
friend who says that she didn't drive because her husband had business and she'd have to be his gopher.
So she won't
And she didn't want to be the gopher all the time, so she
I
didn't
understand
get
that
her
too.
license.
Pinky, going back to, well, what's your first memory? About 19, 20, 21, 22, 23?
Oh,
Your first memories.
Oh, I can remember farther back than that.
How far back?
I can remember back when I was about 6, 7 years old.
Maybe about 22, 23.
Huh?
Yeah, about 21.
Yeah,
20. Okay,
yeah.
let's say 21. Let's say the very early 20s. Talking about cars, and you were at that time living where in the
Down Main Street Extension.
Main Street Extension or wherever,
Yeah.
where we're talking about down there. Describe that road, which is now a fast lane road. Describe that road. What was it like?
Well, the brick ended right there at where it is now. From there on down the road was just a regular road.
Gravel, though.
Yeah, but then we grew peaches and apples and all that kind of things, and we had a lot of peaches. And I remember as a little kid when they paved that road, we give those guys, they eat our peaches, they like them. They was eating them like it's going out of style.
Now how'd they pave it? What'd they pave it with?
Concrete.
Concrete.
Yeah.
All the way to how far down then?
Went clear down to, I think went clear down to the Wayne County line.
Wayne County line.
Yeah.
And that's concrete.
Yeah, that was down by Figs.
Now, in 1921, 22, looking out how many cars do you remember seeing going by your house?
Oh, well, it wasn't hardly any cars. In fact, back then we had gas lights at home, and they had a little box between our driveway and our neighbors where if the pressure's a little low, we go out and push it, because it seemed like the gas came up from Doylestown up there. And
We had gas lights.
Yes.
And
they had little mandrels in them.
Right. And you'd have to pump that to get some more gas pressure.
If it wasn't up enough, we would.
And do you remember when electricity finally came into that area?
Well, it wasn't, not exactly age-wise, I don't, but it wasn't too much longer, although I remember we didn't have a radio for a long time.
Our first radio we got was 1936 and it was used.
Yeah, like I say, we just, when I remember my grandfather lived down, when he went off a farm, he built a house at the corner of Seville Road and 5th Ribbon Road there, and he had a horse. And I remember going down there and get that horse and riding and cultivating and garden with.
With straps tied behind your back and your hands on the cultivator.
Yeah.
And talking to the horse and making him do what you wanted him to do.
Yeah.
Tell us some of the horse. I'm sure that a lot of people don't remember what the old farmers, how the farmers governed the direction of the horses. Tell us about that.
Well, G and Haw,
G is which?
Yeah.
Is right.
Right, yeah.
Haw is left.
And you pull that according to how you want them to go. The only thing that got me, when I was older, I went to work for a farm for Cloyd Cyberlin, and I couldn't hardly get the harness on because of the big perches. They were way up in the air.
Cloyd Cyberling was out there west of...
Cloyd Cyberling, yes. Cloyd
Cyberling was east of
Wadsworth. That was 1939 I worked out
1939. Now, if you wanted the horse to back up, what would you do?
Well, I just pull on the reins back.
But would you also say back?
Yeah.
Now, tell us how you say haw. You don't say haw. How do you say haw?
Well, I don't know. I
would remember the farmers going, haw.
Yeah, I give it a little extra.
Yeah, you got to give it a little extra. You got to give it a little extra. And then we're going to run out of time quickly. I want to ask Janet quickly something. You never knew anything about farms when you were a little kid, right?
No.
Now, when you married Pinky, Harold, and you probably had to say, I married the Harold instead of the Pinky and all of that. What did you think of marrying this person who had been a farmer all his life and you had been somewhat of a pretty well protected city girl? How did that work out?
Well, I don't think I ever gave it much thought.
Never gave it any thought?
His father knew my grandfather, and as a matter of fact, our date with the Leatherman house was a blind date. And I think it just was one of those things. We dated quite a while. Not a long while, concealed, it wasn't years or years, but Pink was a fellow that went to church all the time, and I went to church all the time, and at one time we had kind of the same background that way. He was a member of the Lutheran church until after we had our second child, and he decided we wanted to have the family in one church, and so he came to First Christian, and I was born and raised in First Christian. My grandparents were some of the early members of First Christian.
First Christian. Your grandparents, your families, all the way through, have been a very positive and influential part of the fabric of Wadsworth. You've left a great legacy, and now that legacy is on tape for everyone else to know for years to come. We are so indebted to you for having shared your lives with us today, and particularly the fact that, you know, your days in the post office, your days in town, and everything else you have done all of these things have made Wadsworth richer. Thank you very much for coming today, and we certainly hope that you have a long life to review this tape for years to come.
Thank you, Caesar. We appreciate you having us.